Welcome along everybody. So today I'm going to be showing you how I made this card. As you can see, it's not a card, it's a photocopy of the card. The original's with Wendy, and as you can see I've enlarged it because obviously the card I'm using is a lot smaller, so it just gives you a little bit of a chance to see the detail. And if you need to refer back to this during the video, you can come back to the beginning, pause the frame, and then just check back. Okay, so I'll put a full list of all the colours that I'm going to use, which aren't very many, in the comments column. And I'm going to be using the seasonal skylines set, the trees from the set, and these two little deer at the bottom. But to be honest, you can use any of your cardio stamps in this this type of scene. Okay, so I'm going to start off with putting in some sky. So I'm going to use the dry baby white method for this. I've got a piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to use the this is the Versacraft cool grey. I'm just going to take a little bit onto my baby white, and I always like to rub off, because if you rub off you get these darker lines, and we don't want those in the picture. So then I'm just going to generally just blend over the where we would have the skyline. Now you don't have to worry too much about this, because we can always go back in afterwards and create a little bit more sky. And also where we're going to put the islands, we're going to cover up these marks, so you don't have to worry too much about it. It's just really to give us an idea of the two halves of the card, really. So I'm just building that up a little bit here across the top, and it's probably a little bit difficult for you to see. The trouble with doing a mono type cards is it's hard to see on video, but I'm sure the technique you've seen me do many times, and the other and Lainey and Kat and Wendy, so it's no different to that really. And we all have different ways of doing our skies, so if you want to do it in a different way, that's entirely up to you. Now I know there's different ways, different tools to blend, brushes and even cotton buds and things like that, but for this actual picture I think I've tried the different methods, and I honestly think the baby white method is the best for this. So see how you get on. Okay, I think that's enough for now. So what I'm going to do is put the first island in. So we're going to have the back island here, and I'm going to put the first one in the foreground. So I've just cut a piece of paper. Now, the reason I've cut it rather than just use that really straight edge is just to give a slight suggestion of we don't want it too uniform. On the other hand, we don't want it too wobbly either. So if you just cut it, you get just a slight indication that it's not exactly straight. So I'm going to put my first island in about here. So I would say that's about a third of the way up the card. I'm just going to pop my lid back on the grey. And then I'm going to take my black ink, it's this black Versacolour, and then I'm going to just dab a bit off on the scrap paper. And then what we do is start off on your paper, and then we're just going to work a line across, and where it's here we're just going to build it up, just taking your pressure off, so as you go up it's lighter. And then as you go along this line, you just make that smaller and smaller. Can you see what I'm doing there? Until we get to where we want to stop, which is about there. And then really you just want it to tail off like that. Can you see? So once you've established where that line is, then you can just go back in and make the bottom a little bit darker like this. And each time I'm just dabbing into the black and then just dabbing off onto a piece of scrap paper and doing exactly the same thing again. There, like that. And then, like I say, just carry on, making sure that the bit where you finish is only very thin. And we'll just have another look at that. I think that's probably enough. And then what I'm going to do is rub off the excess black onto this paper and then just take a little bit of lifting the pressure off, just a little bit more misty like that, to indicate there is foliage in the background. Okay, so that's our first island. And then just because I want to make sure it's not exactly the same, I've done exactly the same with another piece of paper, just cut it. And I'm going to place that there, just slightly, so it's, I would say it's about an inch from, or 3/4 of an inch from the other one. Place that there, and then you do exactly the same again. Only this time, we're going to go slightly higher here to about there. That's enough. And then you can see what I'm doing, exactly the same as I did before. You just go in. And what we want to do is overlap these slightly. So I want the top one to finish about here. So we're just going to do that to there. I just want to make sure that's thin enough. Yeah. And then again, we just build up using a swirly motion. Like that. And I'm happy with the height of that. So now I'm just going to go back in and make the bottom darker. Now the reason you make the bottom darker is to give that idea of perspective, that there are trees or foliage in the front and then there's more behind it, and it just gives your picture a little bit more depth. And I'm just going to go back up here like that. Make that a little bit more rounded. Now, the other thing I found is I'm right-handed. So when I do this, the swirls tend to all go in the same direction. So occasionally it's a good idea just to turn your hand slightly so that they go back the other way, because otherwise it all leans to one side and doesn't look so natural. See, like that. And then I'm just going to do the same as I did before, rub the excess off and then just create very lightly a more misty feel behind, like that. And then I'm just going to lift that off. I'm just going to extend that slightly there, like that. Okay, so now you see we've got the basis now of our islands. And then the other thing I'm going to do is, you can see here I've actually torn the paper, and what I'm going to do is just place it like this at an angle. If you want to, you can cover that up if you're worried about getting ink, because we are using blacks and greys. So if you want to cover it up there. And then I'm going to take my grey. Now this is why I'm using Versacraft, because Versacraft is very opaque and will cover over the Versacolor. I'm going to rub a little bit off, and then I'm just going to gently blend a little bit of the grey intermittently along that line and down. And then if I lift up, you can see that just gives a little bit of shading. Again, it's more to lift the, give a more 3D look. And then I'm just going to do the same a little bit further down there, like that. So you get the idea. I think that's enough for that. Okay, so I'm going to move that piece of paper out of the way. And then I'm going to put my stamps in. There's the trees and the deer. So we're going to place that back over there. And then I'm going to use versafine clair nocturne for this. So if I bring this plain piece of paper in, just so you can see what I'm doing, just move these inks out the way. So we give this a good stamping. Now you can use the stamping platform if you want to. These little stamps, I mean, the stamps are so good that you generally get a really good clear image anyway, but it's up to you. And then with our piece of paper in place, because we don't want them to go below the water level, and also then I'm going to place another piece of paper here, because I don't want the tree bottom to show. I'm going to stamp the trees. So press down, and as I've told you before, just keep, because the ink's wet underneath, I'm just going to keep my fingers on it for a little while, just to let the black ink absorb. And then we should have a nice clear image like that. Okay, so you can see the trees disappear into the foliage. And then I'm going to do exactly the same with the two deer. So again, bring my piece of paper back so you can see. Again, using the Nocturne versafine clair. Sorry, move it out of the way. And then it doesn't matter if we see the deer's feet in this, because we can always just put blades of grass around them. So we're going to place them about there. And again, now with the little stamps, you have to be a little bit more careful, because obviously the harder you press, the less likely you are to get those little fine details. So just hold this in place a little bit longer and just gently walk your fingers where they are. And there, that's a lovely crisp image. Okay, so now we've got the tree and the deer in place, we now want the reflection of those in the water. And you've seen me do this technique before, but I am going to show you again. So I'm going to use this piece of paper just to show you how I do this. I take a piece of just one of the backing sheets out of the cards. And again, we ink up the trees again in the versafine nocturne, just as if you were going to do it, stamp it. Now, the only thing you have to be careful is here, they tend to slip a little bit. So try and keep hold of both sides, the cellophane and your stamp, and then just transfer that image onto there, lift up, and then we take this image. Now, obviously, we don't want the bottom of the tree in this, because we haven't got that in our picture. So I'm just going to show you. It's quite easy just to wipe that away like that. And if you're going to do that, make sure you clean up. Just clean up there. Okay, so then we put that there where the trees are. That means we get an opposite reflection. And then you just use the heel of a pen or you know, anything blunt like this, and just rub that image off like that. And there you have the image of the trees in reflection. And then I'm going to rub off this image. Normally I'd use a wet cloth for this, but just for speed. Okay, and then I'm going to do exactly the same with the deer. So don't forget we're using the versafine clair nocturne for this, because it's a permanent ink, and we're going to shade over them in a minute. So make sure you're using the versafine clair, not the versacolor. Okay, so we do the same there, lift that up. It doesn't matter if you lose the fine detail on this, because again, it's just an impression. You wouldn't have all the fine detail in the water anyway. And again, we just rub that like that. Rub the heel of the pen over it, and then we lift that up. And that's our image, that's our reflection there. Put that to one side. And if you clean off your cellophane, you can use it again and again. Okay, so there we have the main set of our picture, and I just want to put a sun in, a moon in at the top. So I'm just using a round stencil. Obviously, you use whatever you prefer to make the round shape. And I think we're going to go for that size, this one. We're going to put it in the middle of our picture, to the side of our picture there. You look at your picture and see what would suit the composition. I'm just going to move these inks so I don't get covered in black ink. Okay, and I'm going to use a new white for this because obviously I want it just to be white, so I don't want it to get contaminated. And for this, I tend to use this Brilliance Moonlight white. You know, it's really up to you, whatever white you like, but this is quite opaque. So, and all I'm doing is just dabbing it onto my baby wipe and then going round the circle. Try and get round the edges so you get that nice round shape, like that. And then I'm just going to do it once more. Oh, we don't want it too bright, so it's just, you know, the brain's very good at recognising familiar things. So there, can you see? And then what I like to do, I'm going to just leave that to dry for a minute. So while I'm doing that, I'm going to put the moon in the water as well. So I'm going to do exactly the same down here, about sort of diagonal to where it is up there. And I'm just lining that up with the bottom of my card so it sits fairly straight. And then I'm doing exactly the same, only not so much this time, probably going twice. Like that. Okay. Now, I'm just going to put the lid on that. Now that's had a bit of a chance to dry off, I'm going to just go around the edge, soften the edge a little bit. Like a halo. Like that. Okay, and I'll do the same with this one as well. So now we come on to creating the water on our scene. And to do this, I'm going to start off with the Versacolor charcoal. So we go back to our darker coloured baby wipe that we've been using. Now, this is quite a new ink pad, so I'm going to put a little bit on here. Again, rub off. As I think we've all of us have said, you can add, but it's quite difficult to take away. So can you see I'm just rubbing along? I'm leaving a little white gap in between the shoreline and the start of the water. And then what you're trying to do with this is put the shadow, so put the shadow where the actual land is. So you're sort of doing a reflection of what's up here, but a lot paler. Obviously, we don't want it too dark. So again, I'm going into my charcoal. I'm moving down through the tree, across there, and along the edge of the little island. And then take your colour and bring it right down to the edge of the card. Like that, very gently. And then just fade it out like that. Now, the other thing I would say to you when you're doing water scenes like this, don't be afraid of white space, because white space actually enhances the effect of the water. So try and be brave. I know it's all trial and error. It took me a while to learn how to do this myself. So, you know, don't give up if it doesn't go right the first time. And then we're going to do exactly the same over here. Now, see, that's what happens when you don't wipe off properly, but don't worry about that because we'll go over it. So we're going to go right the way along here, right to the end. And then obviously there's a lot more foliage and stuff there. So we're going to make this quite big, probably round to there. And then just sort of mimic the shape, so it's not a straight line. You see, like it isn't there. That's like that. Now, because we want this slightly darker, we're going to put a little bit of shade in here. We want this slightly darker, so I'm just going to go over that again. This time I'm going to rub off my charcoal colour a little bit better than I did before. And put a little bit, so you can press harder, press lighter, so you get that sort of tonal quality. And again, if you're feeling a bit nervous about this, just practice it. Practice this technique. So press harder, lift up, press harder, lift up. Just practice it on a bit of paper before you commit to the card. I know, you know, obviously we're all on budgets these days, and cardstock is, you know, it has a price like everything else. So okay, and then we're going to bring the charcoal colour down to sort of meet the bottom of that. Now, you can see I've splodged this card there, but don't worry about that because we are going to put some white lines over, so I'm going to use that to cover up that mark. So I'm just going to go in with a tiny bit. Now, this time I'm rubbing the charcoal right off, so I've only got a very slight bit of colour. And then what I'm going to do is just gently blend where we've got this massive colour. I'm just going to sort of just join it up so it's not white then suddenly dark. Do you see what I mean? So we're just putting a tone in here. Now, it's quite important when you're doing water, I think, to do this side to side motion. You don't want to go up and down, you don't want to swirl, because we're trying to create the ripples in the water. So try and keep your blending from side to side like this. And like I say, again, if you're nervous, just have a practice first. Now, the lovely thing about the baby wipes I use is you do tend to get this natural, there's a natural pattern in them. You do tend to get that, which is really good for doing these sort of scenes. But, you know, whatever baby wipe you use, I think definitely the baby wipe technique is the best for this. It's very difficult with brushes to get this look, because the brushes with the handles are too smooth and the other ones are too rough, really. Right, I'm just going to have a look at that, and I think we just need a little bit more shading in the middle there. So I'm just going to cover that there, like that, and just go over the moon, because obviously the moon is reflecting the water. And there. Okay, at this stage, I like to have a look and see, and I think we're just going to make this a little bit darker and this a little bit darker, just to contrast. So again, I'm going in with my charcoal, and I'm just going to go back over this now, a little bit darker like this, just to contrast. And again, over on this side, I'm just going to do the same here, just to contrast that too. Like that, and then just bring that down. Like that. Okay, now, I know I just said to you about going from side to side, but a little technique when you're doing water is just to add some downward lines like this. So just one, very lightly, like that. That's all you have to do. Now, you won't be able to see those, but it just makes, when you go back across with your pen, it will just pick up those lines. Okay, now I'm just going to go back into my sky now, because it looks very pale. And in fact, I'm going to go back into my sky with the charcoal. I'm going to rub right, you know, most of the ink off. And I'm just going to make some more, a more sort of cloudy sky. Just to, really to give the card a little bit more atmosphere. And just up here. And just around the moon, so we can see the moon a little bit better. Like that. Okay, and behind the tree. Okay. So now I'm going to go in with my pen work. So I'm going to start off with using a fineliner, and I'm using, it's a micro pen, it's at 0.1. And what you do is you just edge along very intermittently like this, along the bottom of your shoreline. Just like that. And then we're going to put some little blades of grass in. Now you can use the grass stamp from the texture set, but if you're going to do that, just be a little bit careful because you don't want a line. So mask off and then stamp. I'm doing this like this just for quickness really, but you know, that's a brilliant little stamp. That in fact the whole texture set is a fantastic little collection of stamps, invaluable. And then we're just going to put a little bit of grass around there. And then we do the same here, up here, and you just make the line a little bit sort of wiggly, because obviously it wouldn't be absolutely uniform straight. And then just fade it out as you go to the edge of the island, like that. Okay. And then we go in with our white pen. Now, as always, I'm just going to turn my scrap paper over. Just rub your pen off to get the ink flowing. And then again, we're just going to put in some white lines along the sea, along the water, like this. And again, it's quite important you keep these straight, that they all go in one direction. Don't be tempted. And I think with this still water look, it's best to keep them straight, don't wiggle them. And obviously we'll want to go for our impressions because they're under the water. So you put those there. Bring that down there. And then you can do long ones. Where the moon is, we can have some longer ones off the page, because you want your, you know, the water's doesn't just stop there where we've stopped the card. So and then we'll have a look at it. I think we need some more probably up here, so we just do some from time to time, because my ink's not dry, you might need to just rub your pen off. I've showed you how to do that before. So, and just another little tip, if you think you've overdone it a little bit, so if you put the pen down, you think that one's probably doesn't look right, then just take the baby wipe and blend it back in again. Like that. And then you can just go over it again with a smaller. And then where I made that mark, I'm just going to cover that up as well. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is go in with my fineliner and just every now and again, just very gently put a little black line underneath some of these, more in the background. Put some here, like this. And there. Like that. Now, I've noticed here it's a little bit white there, so I'm going to just go back in with my charcoal and just blend that in a little bit, because there's too much of a contrast, like that. bring that round. Like that. And back round here. Like that. That's better. And then bring that a little bit closer up. Okay, and so because I've just covered that back over again, I'm just going to go back in with my Signo pen. You can use a Posca pen for this, but the Posca pen tends to be a little bit thick and claggy. And I think this the Signo pen's best for this because it sits flatter on the surface of the card. So I think it's probably better for this. And then we'll just put a few more little black lines in there. Like that. Okay. Now, that's basically the card done. If you want to have it as a winter scene, if you look at the original, I actually masked off the top and the bottom of the card to make it landscape. You can do that. This time I haven't. I've covered the whole card. If you want to make it a winter scene, I put snow on the trees here, but there's no other snow in there. So really, it's entirely up to you. I think these trees look quite nice if you just put a little bit of white highlight in them, because Wendy's done some lovely sort of texturing work on the stamp there. So it's quite nice if you just go in and highlight that. But that's all you need to do, I think, with that. I don't think the deer need highlighting. And I probably would go in and add a little bit more texture here. So, for example, you saw me do the grey. I would probably go in now, tip that upside down, and go in with the black Versacolor and just define that line a bit more. Just along the edge of this torn paper, like that. Do you see? So you get a sort of more defined line, like that. And then go in above it again with the Versacraft grey, like this. Blend it down using the same paper, and then just blend into where you've already done. So we don't really want harsh lines. So just blend that down. And then do you see you get that sort of more textured look, more sort of like that. So it almost looks like there's trees in the background and then there's sort of solid land in the front, which is, if you look at this one, you'll see exactly where that, with a bit more work, it looks like more solid land. And then the last thing is just take your Signo pen and just run it very gently along the shoreline like this. Now we've left it white. It really is just to keep that highlighted, to separate the water from the shoreline, like that. Okay, well, that's basically this technique. You know, when you've done that, you can go in, you can add some more grass, you can get your other stamps and perhaps put more trees in the background. You can change the deer for different things. You can make it a much smaller card and just have one island. You can have a house in the background. The lovely thing is, once you've got this technique, you can use it again and again. And if you want to do a river, you know, a coloured river, you just change the colour of, instead of using mono colours, you use blues and greens. Water tends to reflect what's around it. So if you're doing your background mono, do the water mono. If you're doing your background in greens and browns, then make the water that colour, because that's the reflection, that the water will reflect what's around it. Well, I hope that's helped you understand a little bit of the technique of water. There are other techniques. The sea is a different technique, and hopefully in the future I'll be able to show you how I do it. I'm by no means an expert. I just taught myself all these things, but it is a simple and easy way to get the impression. And I know when I see all your posts on the Facebook group, Craft with Cardio, I think actually these people are much better at this than I am. So I'm sure that you'll be able to help and inspire other people on there. So I'd love to see your work. And thank you all for joining me. I hope to welcome you along the next time. Thank you.